Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. Thank you, Damien and Ivana, for that wonderful introduction. I hope you're all as excited as we are. So, my name is Ian Moore. I'm the technical evangelist here at Absalon, and it's my great pleasure to introduce to you today our first speaker, Marcin Dubel. Marcin earned his master's degree in econometrics and quantitative economics from the University of Warsaw in 2015. And Marcin is a little bit of a unique guy because, as many of you may know, Shiny has only been around for about 10 and a half years, and Marcin has actually been a Shiny engineer for about 8 of those. So before joining Absalon 4 years ago, he worked at companies like Deloitte and Roche Genentech. And to put that in perspective, Shiny modules haven't existed since about 2016, and Marcin has been a Shiny developer since before then. So I can't really think of a more qualified person to take on the big pressure of being the first speaker of the Shiny conference than Marcin. So without further ado, Marcin, the floor is yours.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's true. It's a big pressure, but I'm also super excited about being here. And yeah, I hope that you will enjoy the topic as well. Okay, I see that you can see my screen right now, so let's start. Yes. Hello to everyone here. My name is Marcin Dubel. I'm a staff engineer at Epsilon, working here for almost 4 years. And my main responsibility is what we are calling Epsilon craftsmanship. So you can understand that as the quality of the projects that we are doing for our clients. And important part of this quality is how we are structuring our applications, how we build the architecture, and how we are managing the communication and sharing the state between the modules. So let's proceed and let's go more deeply into this topic. So before we go and to the agenda, let's answer 2 important why questions. First question is why I choose that topic, why I choose that this is relevant for the conference, and the second is why I think that it might be interesting for you. So let's check what was the reasoning for the selection. So first of all, what we observe is that modules are not the default approach selected by the new developers when you're starting new projects, when you're not advanced user of the Shiny. And here, I'm super happy that later today, Emily will talk more about why modules matters and why it shouldn't be considered an advanced topic, but more like a default option that you are choosing to structure your application. Also, at Epsilon, we have this unique opportunity to see a lot of applications done by our clients that come to us for help to improve the maintenance of their application, because they reach to the point where it's no longer possible. And usually what we see that this is because lack of the modules implementation. And our first thing that we are doing to refactor, simplify, make it more scalable is to introduce the modules. The first reason is that how we are using modules at Epsilon and how we are maintaining the communication between them is not quite standard, and we would love to share our experiences and our solutions. So why do I think that it might be interesting talk for you? So first of all, you will be encouraged to use modules, and I think that's a good thing, that it will help you with your development of the Shiny applications. You will get some specific materials to learn more about communication and building modularized application. And also, you will see this non-standard Epsilon way to deal with the module structure for Shiny. Okay, so let's check what is planned for the session. So we will have 3 sections. So I will go briefly through the modules themselves, so the concept and what we understand by them. Then we will talk about communication between modules, that is a standard approach, and sharing application state, so how we are doing that at Epsilon. And the first two parts that might sound familiar for you, and this is because they are like exact titles of the articles that you might find on the POSIT website. By first one by Winston Chang and the second by Eric Nance. I need them for two reasons. So first is to give you the full context before the third part, so that we make sure that we are all on the same page. And also, I think that it's never enough reminding how great concept the modules are. Okay, so let us start with this like classics recap. This is like very standard thing, basic about the modules. I hope that you are already familiar with that. If not, this is one of the reasons I'm giving this talk. Then I highly encourage you to check the article by Winston, because yeah, the modules are a great concept. And as Ian said, I remember the days before it was introduced and how we were trying to overcome the problem of the massive server and UI scripts and build some like multi-files convention naming system. That was working, but it was a lot. And modules is like truly a game changer here and makes all the life easier. Okay, so modules. This is quite easy stuff. So we have a module that will contain the counter button. So there is this UI part that you are, of course, putting the your button and or your outcome that you are expecting. So here is a button and the text. You can see it here. And there is the server part that is dealing with the interactivity here. This is super simple in that example. So you have the observe event for the button that is increasing the count. And when you are trying to use that inside the application, you are just calling the UI part and the server part, and you can use it as you can see here. Very easy concept that you are packing like the part of your application. Here it's kind of like the whole application in this simple example, but you are packing like the one part of it together. And thanks to the namespacing, you can treat this as independent from the other parts of the application. Okay, I think that this is quite simple and quite known to all of you. Probably the greatest feature of the modules is that we can reuse them easily. So if we would like to add the second button, it's quite intuitive that we just need to add a second call for the module with a different ID. So the first argument here is ID, and we need to make sure that they are matching between the server and the UI part. And we will end up into two separated modules. They are behaving independently, but we don't need to reuse the code that is creating the module itself. So this is a super dry solution as well. Okay. So to recap, the modules allows us to build small and understandable pieces of the applications. They are not always small because modules can be nested within each other. So we can actually expand this very quickly and have one module that is containing quite a big part of the application. But because it is calling the nested modules inside, it will still keep being quite understandable when you are going through the code. The modules are isolated in the sense that each has its own namespace, so we don't need to care about like the naming being repeated between modules. So in our simple case, we can have button count here and button count in other module or in other instance of the same module, and thanks to the namespacing, we will be secured. They are reusable. What we saw, it's super easy. We can treat them as functions that we are calling multiple times, and we are saving and not repeating the code. And they are independent, so it is easy to transfer them to a different application. They just require some specific inputs, and they are easily transferable. However, in that talk, we will go through the cases when they are not that fully independent. So we actually want to make them connected to the different parts of the application. So we want them to receive or return specific objects that are coming from the different parts of the application. So we will question a little bit this independence here and see how this is working in practice. And in practices, this is what you can see a lot. Okay, so let's go through the what I call standard approach or functional approach. You will see how this is similar to how functions are behaving. And this is based on the great article by Eric Nance that you can also find here on the POSIT website. Yeah, let's see what's going on there. So there is this example of the Ames Housing Data Explorer that Eric is using. And what we can see here is there's one module with the plots. Actually, there are like two plots together in the single module. I will modify that later, but it doesn't matter. And there is a module for the selection of the variables. And here it's like one module repeated twice. So we have this reusability here for the variable selection. And as you can imagine, the left-hand side variables are connected to the left-hand side plot, and the same, the second pair we have here. And what is happening in the code in that approach is that values are passed directly from one module to another. So there is like a very specific chain of what we are returning from one module, here the variables, and what we are passing and what the other module is expecting. So here the plots that they are expecting the variables from the variable module. Okay, let's check how this is organized in the code. So first of all, we have our variables server. I skipped the UI part, but it's just like two dropdowns. And you can notice the explicit return statement. And this is quite different, and this is not something that you can see in a regular module. There is no obligation to return anything from the module. But in that approach, if we want to make sure that the objects from one module will be transferred to another, we need to return it. And we are returning the list of two reactives that will contain our X and Y variables. Okay, and what is happening in the main server of the application? We are saving the values of the module. So we are not only calling the server, but we are also assigning this to the variable that we are passing to the second module, our scatterplot server. That is using those inputs as arguments is variable. So this is, as I said, this functional approach that we are just expecting some arguments, some inputs to the function, and we are passing this whenever we are calling the module server. Okay, what else you need to remember here is that it's not that independent in a sense that you are just passing anything to the module. You need to remember kind of like what is your structure. So here you need to remember that you passed a list. So what you need to access is X variable, and that those are reactives. So when and whether to use the parentheses at the end of the variable to not get to the reactive, but its value inside, it will be important. Of course, you can imagine organizing this code a little bit different to make it more explicit what you are expecting from the variable module. But yeah, still you need to kind of like have this knowledge what is returned by one module, and whenever you are using scatterplot somewhere else to provide some similar structure of the object. Okay, so this is the standard way, and I can only repeat after Eric that yes, this is well organized, this is easy to manage, easy to document, because you just have like very explicit inputs for your module, and you can document them quite nicely. It's intuitive because this is like similar to the functions that we are all fans of in the R community. And to make everything clear, there is nothing wrong with this approach. It's perfectly working. I can totally recommend you using that. It's great. And as if you are not using modules, please start, and you can use that approach nicely described by Eric in his article, in some talks, to assure that there is a communication between modules. However, we are here at the conference to see something more. So that's I wanted to present you the different approach that we are using at Epsilon a lot, and that is the object-oriented approach with a lot of parts that we are calling the managers that will be managing the specific objects in the application, and we will move those objects around between modules. And you can also learn about that. It might be not that new for you if you are following our blog and some projects that we are doing. For example, we described this quite nicely using the Pedro's Shiny Contest award-winning game of Shiny decisions. And there is this part about the structure that is describing how the managers can be used to organize your application. Okay, so coming back to our same Ames Housing Data Explorer example and how that will be organized when we are choosing that approach for communication between modules. So again, we have a module for the plots and variables first. So it's again the same module repeated twice. And here I decided to split and have one single module for each plot. So we are repeating the plot module, and we have two instances of those. However, right now we won't be passing directly from one module to another, but we will use the middleman, that is the state manager. And again, we can have two instances of those for each part of the application. And now both the variables module and the plots module will discuss directly and communicate directly with the state manager in both ways. So both modules has access to the instance of the state manager class. I think I call it in that example just variables or variables manager. And it's all depends of like what fields and what methods you will have described there. You will see in a minute. But I think that you'll now see the difference in those two approaches. Okay, so what we have in our approach, what is different, and there is like this new big thing that is the R6 class. That is this our state manager called variable here. So you can see that this is like nothing new here. It's the R6 class. So if you are familiar with that approach to object-oriented programming in R, you will be feeling quite familiar with what I will be describing. So R6, you can learn more about that. I can encourage you to read through the advanced R book, for example, or many other sources you will find easily online. Basically, the idea is that we have fields and methods, and we will start here with some methods that I will reveal in a minute, and two fields that will be responsible for our variable x and variable y. Also, we can initialize multiple instances of our class, our manager. So what you saw on this simple picture on the previous slide, I also initialized two of them. So we have those two blocks of state manager plus variable selection module, scatterplot module, and they are kind of like grouped together. If the syntax looks a little bit odd, this is because this is all Rhino application. This is using some box modules that are more explicit and more encouraging you to use the module structure and to separate the view and logic. Yeah, at Upsilon we love modules. By the way, I think that like this group of state manager and one module for variables, one module for scatterplot, they might be even wrapped in its own module so that we are just having two of those. But as you can see, we are also saving to the object that will be passed to the modules, our state manager. And we are passing this to the both modules because as you saw, that will be something shared between those modules. You can think about that we are moved to the another level of thinking. So we are not going like down to specific small objects like variables that will be moved around the application, but we are more on the level of the managers. And those managers are what we are interested in here in the main server, so the main application server. And what we will do with those variables, that will be defined inside the class and inside the modules itself. So here we are kind of like keeping our mindset on a very high level. Okay, so what's going on in the variable selection module? So we are still like observing our inputs, x bar and y bar. However, we are not returning anything. We will be calling specific methods from our class variables that is passed to our module, and that will be the only interaction that we'll be doing. So we will be calling the methods from the variables class. Now, what methods? This is our decision. So here there are two: setting variables. This is the method with arguments, our inputs, and the triggering plot. So let's see what they are doing. Our set variables is a very simple thing. It just sets the values and saves this as a class fields. You can learn more about the R6 classes if this self-dollar annotation is not something you're familiar with. And the triggering plot is the only part reactive in our class that will be increasing the value of the triggers. So letting us know that, yes, this is the good time to pass the reactivity to the plot. So this is also reducing all this reactivity mess that we might end up with the application, because we are very specific on what should trigger our plots. So in scatterplot, what's going on is that we are using this triggers plot to let the Shiny know that, yes, this is the time when you want to do the triggering. And we are using from our class, from our variables, we are using what is saved there. So we had to use this set vars to be able to access those here. That's all. We don't have any direct connection between the variables and scatterplot. We are going through the through the class, through the manager. This triggering control might be quite useful if we want to modify this a little bit, and for example have a other module that will do the triggering on some button click. It's easy because we are just removing the trigger plot from here, and we are moving this to any other module, and still all the other logic is the same. The other object that you might be interested in here is this dataset, and if you check the repo connected to this presentation, you will see an example when the dataset is the manager itself, because that's all the idea. And one note, this is not the global reactive values solution. Quick reminder what I have in mind. This is also something that Eric was mentioning in his talks. I encourage you to check. You can create like one global reactive values thing and pass it to every module that you might imagine. And this is not that. This is not that. This is not something that we are doing this. This is what we can call the kitchen sink approach. And no, it's about organizing your thinking on the object level. Okay, and I can hear your concerns that it's like overcomplicated, it's not explicit, and it's too much passed to the module. How to test it? that's quite simple because you're just testing the logic inside the class, not any separate functions. However, I think that to see exact benefits, you need to have the app that is big enough, not that example, and the benefits of those will come with scale, and the scale will come. So we see it a lot, how the applications are growing, and it's harder to manage them and it's harder to introduce the architecture if you haven't started from the very beginning. It's no matter what approach you are using, if you have the correct mindset of splitting your thinking, your logic into small pieces, small modules, you can end up with like one kitchen sink module as well. Then you will be good to go and you should be very secure. And as I mentioned, there might be multiple modules, managers that you will be using. And there are some usual suspects that we are seeing repeated in our applications. So there will be some manager for database connection. So everything related to the database connection will be there in one place for you to organize it, and you can pass that manager to any module that requires the database. Data manager. This is usual case that that you're sharing the data and you want to have it accessible in different parts of the application, in different modules, and also one place to organize all the code related to operations that you're doing on the data, fetching it, maybe some pre-processing. It will be all there, easy to test, easy to manage, easy to maintain. User manager, everything about the user info, permissions, what to display on the front end about that user can be there. Validation, if you are doing some data validation, can be a separate class. Some general state manager, so you can put everything related to the state here. Just be careful to not make it your kitchen sink, but you can keep here different stuff. And any other manager that you can imagine. So to give you some ideas of what those can be, just 2 screenshots from the Shiny Decisions apps and Shark Attack. So those are the public repositories that you can see. In Pedro's solution, you can see some yes, there is a data manager, there is also a state manager, but they are very specific parts that are responsible for different parts of the application. In that case, it was some game, deck, map, metrics. For the Shark Attack, there were other like grid, leaderboard, object, score. And this is the main point of this concept, that you are treating your logic in the application as a separate module, we can say, that will be passed between the view modules containing the UI and containing the interactions from the user. In the Shark Attack, there is also interesting feature that as those are RC classes, you can have inheritance. So the trash manager is actually inheriting from the objects because this is the specific case of the general object. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I hope that you found it interesting, that you will go and check the solutions of sharing the app state. You can find a lot of cases here. There is a link to the repository with the code, a little bit even more complex that I presented with the AMES housing. There are also links for other examples. Unfortunately, I cannot show you like all the work that we're doing for clients using the managers approach, but those should give you the quite good idea of what they are about. As far as I know, the slides will be shared with you, so I hope that you will enjoy and you will use modules more often, and you will structure your application with that mindset. This is super useful. It proved to be working for us. Thank you.
All right, Marcin, thank you so much for this presentation. I know that this was probably eye-opening for a lot of people in the audience. As we're going to see from Emily Reeder, like coming up on the learning module side, like that's a first step. Learning R6 classes, this is like a whole nother step. So I hope people find value in this. Unfortunately, we're not going to have enough time for all of the questions that came through the audience, but I just wanted to quickly ask one or two along the lines that maybe can answer some quick questions for people. One of the first ones that came in is, do you have a recommendation on the size that a module should be? Should this be limited to a certain number of lines of code? And should people at some point say, oh, this is now 2 modules, not 1?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a tough one. And this is something probably that you cannot skip, that you will end up refactoring a little bit, or seeing that, okay, now the thing that we saw that, okay, this is a part of the same module, we need to extract this to separate things. The same with managers, the same with the modules in the Shiny application. I encourage you to draw a plan of your app. It might be quite helping for you to understand what are the modules that you can expect. There are, of course, some red flags. So when you are hitting like too many lines and the scrolling becomes like quite annoying thing, then yes, definitely red flag. Time to split.
Thanks for that answer, Marcin. So because of the limited time, we'd like to ask people to kind of follow up on your conversations if you have further questions in our shinyconf.slack channel. But one quick question I have for you, Marcin, because I feel like I missed the whatever the memo was about us having to add module server to our modules. Can you explain to me when that came along? And for people who are just seeing that for the first time, do they need to do this moving forward?
I'm not sure if I understood you. Yes, you need to add modules.
So yeah, just to clarify, we used to be able to write modules just as if it was a single function, and now we're writing a function, going to the next line, module server, and then writing our code. And I, maybe this is a pointless question, but I'm wondering if you could expand on that, because we had a question about that.
Okay, I'm not sure. So there is this. It might be confusing because of the Rhino implementation. It might be a little bit different. I encourage you to check out there. But they are think that also might be confusing because some time ago there was a change in the syntax in the regular Shiny. So we used to use the call module thing, and it was modified some time ago with the module server. So yeah, you can also find this in the article from the Winston that I presented on the links.
All right, Marcin. Well, thank you so much. And once again, thank you for being our first speaker. Huge pressure, but you did an amazing job. So thank you once again, Marcin.
Thank you.